This is Jenny Larson conducting my first interview with Brenda King at the Susanna Dickinson Museum in Austin, Texas on October 12, 2014. This interview is part of the Conversations to Create Unity oral history project conducted by the Susanna Dickinson Museum and Baylor University. Thank you for coming in today.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
So I'm wondering if you can start by just talking about where you were born, when you were born, and kind of give us the Brenda, the early years.
The early years. Okay. Well, I was actually born here in Austin, Texas, in 1953, March 10th, and at the Holy Cross Hospital, which no longer exists now. It was located on, don't let me try to remember where it was located, I guess. I think it was close to what is now MLK. And I grew up on 9th Street and Lincoln, which is near Houston-Tillotson College. Went to Blackshear Elementary School and Keeling Junior High, and I was in the last class that graduated from the original L.C. Anderson High School before it desegregated and was closed.
So tell me about your neighborhood growing up as a kid. What was that like? Like a day in the life, like a Saturday?
Oh, it was great. It was fun. I actually grew up on my family's homestead, and there were like 4 houses, and me and my cousins all lived near each other and near my grandparents. And so we would have a lot of fun playing and building toys, and our streets were not paved at that time, so we were walking around barefooted on rocks and playing kickball, and we were really having a delightful time. I mean, our neighborhoods at that time were all African American Black. And so it was like one big family. Now this is in Austin. I did spend some early years in Lampasas, Texas, where my daddy lived. And my mother wanted to move us from there to Austin for just a better chance at life. It was a smaller town. We were going to the Lampasas Colored School, and it was a whole different kind of situation. But it was good, even at that. My school memories from there were wonderful. Every grade level was a row in this particular school, so I was listening to all of the lessons for when I was in the 1st grade through 6th, and it was really small school and a real good family environment. And then I came to Blackshear, and it was a really overwhelming because it was a big school and several 1st grade classes, several second, so I wasn't in the same room with everybody else. So it was great. So
and tell me more about what that was, what Blackshear was like, what your elementary school.
Oh gosh.
Any memories that stick out?
I'm such a nerd. I just love school, period. All of the people at our school, usually we would see each other also at church. It was a real community, or at the grocery stores. And so it was real familiar after a while. The people in my neighborhood, we would walk to school. And so there was a, certain sense of security within the neighborhood. There were parents that were at home as we walked to school and were watching us, and if we did something wrong, my parents would know it before I got home. It was that kind of community. The school was really good. I mean, the teachers, some of my favorite ones, were at Blackshear. My mother-in-law, who I eventually married her son, was a 3rd grade teacher there. I didn't know that, of course, at the time, but she taught my sister. So it's a lot of community, really close knit. So
now you said that you were born in 53. Mm-hmm. So you were 9 years old in 1964 when the Civil Rights Act was signed. So I'm wondering if you can talk about what you remember from that year and those years building up and surrounding?
Yeah, I don't remember a lot about the signing at that time. I didn't experience it. In fact, my parents didn't talk to us a lot about that. It's kind of interesting that they didn't. But I do remember all of the times, I guess, the struggles with the police and the dogs biting people, it's just a whole terrible part of that led up to that. And it was frightening. So I think my parents kind of shielded us from a lot of it. But it wasn't until I was in high school when the talk started about desegregating our schools. And that really, was kind of sad in a way, because my sister was taken to another school and I was there left to finish out my years until they closed our school. But I don't recall even discussing it with my parents that much. They kept it kind of, they wanted our world to just be easy going, and I don't think that was all that good, because when I got to college I was a little radical, Afro wearing, person. It caught up with me. So anyway.
So talk to me a little bit more about that high school experience when you were finally faced with that desegregation. And do you have any particular memories that stick out to you at that time?
Yes, that was a lot going on then. I was student council president that last year that it was open. And so I was invited to be on discussions and panels and on television and things like this. And I was very shy. It was a lot for me to have to put myself in front of a camera or whatever. But they started out trying to desegregate it. So there were some Anglo kids that came to our school that I befriended and had a great time with. But that didn't last very long, because a lot of the families would move out of the district that they were in, that made them have to come to our school. So it didn't work. And, I didn't realize that our school was separate and unequal. All of that. I didn't, because we had excellent teachers looking back on it. Many of them had master's degrees, and when they desegregated that last year, they were taken and put into the other schools. And we had a lot of first-year college graduates over at our school struggling to teach us and, relate to our experience. So, but I loved my school, and was, by the time I grew up, all of these people, the teachers and everything, were like family. So it was the best of both worlds, and then some, struggle, with all of the changes that were going on.
Before we move into talking about college years and early adulthood, and so still kind of staying in your youth, and you can speak to this in terms of your very young childhood, elementary, middle school, high school, all of it. But talk to me about just the general landscape of Austin and how it was growing up in Austin, and a more sort of as a larger, like looking at the city.
Yeah. Well, my city in Austin was east of 35. We did not venture across 35. It was a line of demarcation, so to speak. So my world centered around, like I said, I grew up near Houston-Tillotson, and a lot of the activities at the college and my school, everything was in walking distance pretty much. And so we played a lot. We were free. There was not, I can't say that there was a lot of crime going on, or, the things that might be experienced now, that are. So it was a pretty blissful childhood that I had. And my fondest memory was Rosewood Park, swimming there, and a lot of things, fun memories there at Rosewood. And I grew up in Ebenezer Baptist Church, and that was something that I looked forward to, because there were a few of my friends that were at Reagan High School, and I was at Anderson, so we would get together and look forward to seeing each other at church. A lot of things happened that centered around the church and school. So, but Austin, I guess the early years it centered around 19th Street, which is now MLK, and we lived, like I said, at 9th Street. So it was a small world there. And then my family built a home directly off of what is now MLK and near 183. So it was Springdale Hills neighborhood that I grew up in my later years. And so it was a much broader world then, and a lot more activities that we were involved in. Although my parents were very ultra protective of us, my sister and I only have one sister, she's 2 years younger. And so the Jack and Jill organization, we didn't belong to it, but we were really good friends with all the people that were, because that was a pretty uppity group of people that parents had to be teachers or some professionals, and mine were blue collar workers. So, but a lot of fun memories of that. And anyway.
So I wonder if you can speak to, and I actually am thinking about this in terms of thinking about talking to Jarrett, and how we talked a little bit about his kind of like dawning realization that racism existed. And so I wonder if you can speak to like that own realization in your childhood.
Oh yeah. I do have one memory that's forever embedded in my head, and I probably was about 5 years old, maybe. Yeah, I wasn't in school yet. My father and his friends would go to the lake, and I'm not sure exactly which part of that. It was near Lampasas, but if they wanted to get beer, because Lampasas was dry, they would have to drive to the lake. And there was this particular restaurant that they would always buy barbecue there. And we would go through this door, and there were red and white checker, I'm forgetting, tablecloths. It was nice. And so we, thought that was the restaurant. And then one day my sister and I wandered over to this curtain, and the people were very nice to us that owned the restaurant. I mean, they were like, oh, come back, here's some candy, and trying to bring us back. And we opened it up and peeked through. It was a totally different restaurant. All white people, white tablecloths, a totally different environment. And I will never forget that. That's when I began to feel that there was something different about us. And that was at a very young age, because the white folks that we dealt with were the ones that my parents worked for, and they treated us like family, so to speak. And so I never really felt, any difference then. And the other thing is, as we got a little older, and if we went to the movies, of course, we'd have to sit in the balcony. Now, this is Lampasas. Austin had this wonderful theater called the Harlem Theater, and it was great, and we had a great time there. But in Lampasas, because it was a totally different world, that's where we would have to sit. And I do remember all of that, the different water fountains and all of that. But my parents always didn't make a big deal out of it to keep us from feeling less than. But one of the families that my uncle worked for, the kids decided they wanted to take us to the movies one day. And they said, we're not sitting up there, we're going to sit right here. And I was so scared. For no reason. I mean, I hadn't had anything happen to me, but I knew that it wasn't right. It wasn't where I was supposed to be. And it was Breakfast at Tiffany's. So whatever year that came out, you can kind of trace how old I was. I don't remember, but I couldn't even enjoy the movie. So I bought it later in life so I could take a look at it. But anyway, but that experience was, really horrifying for me because I'd already been indoctrinated to the balcony.
Yeah, so you talked about your parents not really pulling you into those sort of like political conversations. But did they ever talk with you as a youth and, child maybe not, but as a youth, did they have conversations with you about this is the world we're living in and this is how you navigate it? And
yes.
And do you have any memories of specific conversations or specific lessons?
One specific one with my dad. He said, you can be friends with them, but don't bring one here to marry. And I will never forget that. He said, because I don't want to have to, beat up somebody because they do you wrong or they do something wrong or their relatives don't like you or they mistreat you. Don't ever bring one here to marry. And I didn't, but I had, very close friends that we were very close and could have, but there was this block in my head and I never would do it because I knew my daddy. And so that as well as I guess by their actions, I was not very aggressive with anybody, in the presence of white people. My parents were very polite and respectful, and there were just things that happened that weren't quite the way they are now. I feel a lot. I mean, of course, I'm free. I'm 61 years old now, but then I watched them, and so that's the way I behaved.
So actually, let me ask first, are there any other memory? Because I want to move into college because you hinted at that being your radical phase and political phase. And so I really want to hear about that. But before we move into that part of your life, is there any other, childhood sort of early years stories or things that you would like to pass on?
Let me think. I mean, there are a lot. But
if something comes up as we keep talking,
I'll bring it back.
You can bring it back.
But I know my sister, when she had to go to Reagan and I was at Anderson, she was very unhappy and would come home, talking about the way they were treated. She was in the band. I think that with me, because I was such a good student, I had a lot of opportunities to do things whenever there was an opportunity for us to go across, say to UT, and play my flute in the UT band, during the summer, their summer band program. I was able to go there, but I never felt quite good enough and really was afraid to play and make a mistake. When the computers were launched way back when, I was invited to go to this program that had Key Punch, and they would teach you the computers and all this. So I did have exposure, I think, that a lot of my friends didn't have, and I was, really made more aware of the differences, separate but unequal thing, and so I really felt great when my niece was actually in the UT band when she graduated from high school, and she graduated from UT. So it's like a full circle for me when she was able to succeed at that. But for me, I was petrified. But I did have a lot of opportunities that I think others didn't. I don't know. I think it was ironic that I was selected DAR, Good Citizens, as Daughters of the American Revolution. And we went to a dinner, and one of the ladies there asked my daddy which country in Africa was he from. He's very dark-skinned. Things like that are kind of embedded in my memories. But anyway, there are some, I'm sure they're deeply hidden. I know how to keep them there so that it can be a foundation, but not what's in front of me that's dictating the lens in which I see the world now.
I love that thought. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So if memories come back again,
I'll
you can share. But let's talk about your college years. So did you stay in Austin for university?
No, as a matter of fact, I was accepted at every historically black college without applying. They recruited me. And just looking back on Jared, my son, when he was accepted at all of these universities that he didn't even apply to, not even the historically black ones. So I was like, yes, things are somewhat changing. But I chose not to go to those schools. I went to Southwest Texas State, decided that I needed to be embedded in the white culture, so to speak, to round me out, because my whole upbringing had been in my black community. And not discounting that upbringing or what those other colleges would have provided me with, but I somewhere innately felt that I needed to have that experience. I didn't want to go too far from home, but that was close enough. So that's where I really started to find myself and discover just the world according to other people and my friends that I met from other places that had similar and also different experiences that I did. So, finding myself, I loved Angela Davis and the whole struggle there, Black Panther. I just really enjoyed it, just being free and away from my parents, having us, safe and protected. And I do appreciate them for that. But it was also not my mind and my beliefs, it was theirs. And so I joined our black organization on campus called Umoja, that's the way it's pronounced actually, and was actively engaged in that group. And we just did, we brought Dick Gregory to Texas, Southwest Texas, and I was able to go and pick him up from the airport and sit around and in the back seat with him and talk and just pick his brain. And he was looking, palm reading me or doing something and rubbing my hands and saying, "You're going to have a hard time finding a man because you actually have a daddy, I bet, that's very overbearing and real." I'm like, "How do you know?" Anyway, it was great, meeting him because he was very radical then. But I just kind of engaged in whatever was going on, and then went through the semi-flower child hippie phase, which Jared, my son, used to describe me to his friends as being already, still being one. But anyway, it was just a pretty nice school. It was only 75 black children, black youth there when I was going.
Out of how many students total?
Oh, I don't know. It was a very small percentage, 1% of the population. I don't really remember, but it was a very small percentage of us.
Did you come back to Austin after college?
After college, I did for a short period of time, but then I moved to Houston and lived there for many years and worked as assistant director of financial aid at University of Houston, and that's where I got my master's in social work there. So, that was another learning experience too, because I was totally, on my own then. I graduated college in 3.5 years from Southwest Texas because I took a large load and everything, and then some of my friends left there and went to Texas Southern and finished college, so many of them were in Houston, so that's why, okay, I'm going where my friends are, but I was already finished and worked.
So you finished school, and we're back in Austin not very long.
Not very long at all.
And then from speaking with Jared, I know that you moved back when he was 2, or?
Yes, he was about 2, yeah.
So talk to me about that coming back to Austin and how you saw it change and experienced its change. And maybe starting with just talking about that time period, and then, you know, we can move our way into the more present. Yeah.
Okay, so Jared was born in Houston, and my husband got a really good offer to work at IBM. He was a computer nerd, so we moved back home. Really, he looked for housing for us before we moved. And so, ironically, my dad was helping him look at places, and we actually didn't move to East Austin. We moved off of McNeil and 183, which is, what was the name of the neighborhood? Oh my God. I'm having a senior moment. But it was a really, really nice neighborhood. Very, I would say we were probably in the minority, very much so. I mean, Jared's, it was, I can't think of the name of the neighborhood yet, but having that bad experience. But anyway, it was different. And so, coming back home to my parents, visiting that neighborhood, the community still felt the same.
Let's pause for a second because
Okay.
we had to pause there for a second for someone to come and go, and we're back talking to Brenda King.
Okay.
So I think we were talking about, you had bought a house in that neighborhood.
Yes, and coming back into East Austin, you know, there was a lot of changes. I mean, I saw them gradually because, you know, I was coming home visiting from Houston but didn't live here. So, really, a lot of the folks that I went to school with, many of them stayed here. So, you know, reconnected with them a lot was fun, but they didn't have the kind of view on things. Like Jared was small, and so I didn't have to work right away, and I would take him to Zilka Park and let him play and run around, and there would be no folks, you know, of color there. It was totally different back in, I guess he was born in 87, so that wasn't that long ago, but he would play, and they were like, well, you know, Rosewood Park is still nice. Some of my friends were still in that mindset that you don't venture across, you know, over there. And so I chose different for him. And so the thing that happened that got him started in daycare, because I stayed at home with him as long as I could, was that my mother was, this is ironic, the EEO director at the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. And they started this on-site daycare center. And I did all of my research for my master's program on child care in America, and knew that that was going to be the best world for Jared, although I was not an employee. So they didn't fill up the daycare, so they started letting grandchildren go, and it was excellent for him. He flourished there, and so, you know, I went to work for Austin Families, which is a child care resource and referral agency, and that's where I started working after we came back. So I don't know what else to say, but Austin had changed. I mean, some growth in the area, and we were living, like I said, off of 183 and MLK. And
so I know you had said that some of your friends in that early 80s, or late 80s actually, were still, we want to stay on the east side. Do you feel like you still have friends who feel that same way?
Well, I don't really have, they're not friends of mine anymore. You know, I have a whole different group of people that I hang around with, but I know that the majority of them, and a lot of the people from the east side, instead of moving over, I mean, there are some that live, but a lot of people live in Pflugerville now. They call it East Austin North. And I'm like, where is that? They're like, Pflugerville, that's where everybody moved to. And I'm like, oh, so a number of people that I know that I went to school with live in Pflugerville.
And can you speak to why you think that's happening, even if you think I already know?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's still on the east side of 35, in a comfort zone with other people that you know that are living in that community, trying to make community. And I actually live in Northeast Austin. So, but my neighborhood is totally integrated. I mean, it's just on my street, there's probably out of 10 homes, just say there's on the street, there's probably about 4 black families there. I mean, it's just, it's right behind Reagan High School, off of Berkman, Coronado Hills. So I chose that. My dad was like, well, you all don't have to live way out off of 183. Let me show you some other neighborhoods that are open now. He was always a little ambassador to, still trying to take care of me. So we found the home where Jared really actually grew up in when he was in elementary school. So.
And how would you talk about, if you were going to talk about the change from Austin from the late 80s to today, how have you seen things change or stay the same?
Very eclectic. A lot of Anglos are moving in to the neighborhood, and I can remember on my street the first family that moved. I don't even know if it's a family. It might have been. I don't even know them, but when I came home, Daddy was like, you see them? They don't mow their grass or anything. I'm like, it's actually a nature thing. They're not, they're just natural, and they're growing their plants in their front yard rather than manicuring it. And he's like, oh, it's just, it's something terrible. I said, well, that's just what they do. It's not any big deal, And so the other thing is that there are lots of modern-looking houses where houses have been refurbished, and the little McMansions are all over East Austin now. In fact, my mother passed away, and her sisters decided to sell the homestead that we had, and one of the persons that bought the corner house, they actually split it up. She wanted to preserve the way the house looked, the style that it had, and it is still there, a different color, but next to it is a 2-story McMansion that is totally, the neighborhood is totally different. And so I think it's good and it's sad at the same time, but it's progress. And it doesn't bother me because I live in that community and have for a while, but it really bothered my dad. And what else bothered him at his older age were the bike lanes. It's like bicycles, now we don't have a large enough street. We have to look out for the bicyclists and da-da-da-da-da. And he's very not open to change. So, but understandably at his age, he doesn't, get it, though, but he doesn't have to. Anyway.
So I wonder if you can talk about your own activism a little bit more, and there are a couple of areas of conversation I'd like to have. One around activism, and the other around law enforcement, and your experiences, relationships with any stories that come up for you. Just thinking about those two topics.
Let me think about that. Law enforcement, I've never run across anything having to do with that, although one time someone broke into my car. My grandmother was saying, somebody's in your car, and we called the police, and they came, and they had somebody, they grabbed somebody, they searched the neighborhood, but I couldn't identify the guy. But it was almost like, they were like forcing me to, and I'm like, I can't say, because it was dark. I can't say that was him. But also, my only other memory, and it's not really with law enforcement, but my father's brother was murdered by someone, and it happened in East Austin. And basically, they got off the hook with it. They claimed that it was self-defense, and it was a black-on-black crime, and the guy was somewhat insane. So that happened. My first husband, not Jared's dad, his brother was in a high-profile murder. He was murdered, and his body left in the park, and his name was Bill Bailey, and it was a big deal about him because many of the folks that had murdered him were in jail at the time, and one of the women that was at the center of it couldn't testify against her, boyfriend or husband or whatever he was, and so that never resolved itself. So, I was very careful with Jared when he went to school in Barton Creek Country Club area at St. Michael's to say to him, never disrespect or make any unnecessary moves around the police. I don't even know if he remembers that, but I was always afraid of him, being in that area and being profiled in some way because of that.
So I know we've kind of spoken about your activism in college, and I wonder if, maybe you have some specific stories about events you attended or rallies you were at or anything like that.
Yeah, I can't say that I remember them right now. I mean, it was just our expression of my blackness with my afro and my identity and all of that. And then being a part of that group, whatever we were doing, I was there, whether I believed in what we were doing or not. That's why it's not embedded in my head the way it should be post-stroke. But anyway, I'm trying to think, did we ever have any sit-ins or anything? Not that I recall.
What about, activism in your adulthood, even to today?
I'm pretty low-key now. I think my afro is the only thing that, my little afro is the only thing that I have left of that. But I do get upset when I hear about the young man that was killed recently, and things like that bother me very much. So I'm afraid for our country, and I do like Art Acevedo. I think that he's trying, but our police still have a way to go here in Austin. And I'm just concerned, and I probably would participate in something, but I haven't, because I've been a mother and I don't want to have myself in the middle of something that I would regret. But now that he's an adult, probably, if something hit very close to home, I would. There's that little piece of me that's still there, although I'm very cautious about what I stand for outwardly as a professional, and that's probably not good. I should have a lot more spunk in me than like I had before. But I wish I'd thought about something, but I could tell you later. I don't know.
I know. So this next topic, it's something that we've kind of already talked about and around and through and all of it. But I'm wondering if there are any other specific stories about your relationship to Austin in terms of our race, and personal experiences that had an impact on you, or experiences you remember that had an impact on the community. And I know we talked a little bit more specifically about incidents in your youth or college, but this can be sort of opened up and just in your life in Austin in general.
Gosh, I guess, the biggest thing was the desegregation thing within Austin. And at that time, and that was close to the time that they actually brought Angela Davis into Austin. Overall for Springdale, and I remember going to that. It was at night, and so it was under the cloak of darkness. But I don't remember her speaking. I just remember her being right at Springdale Gardens, which is apartment complex at Springdale and Riverville, somewhere around there. So there were things that were happening. I think I kind of shied away from things, but deep down inside, I wanted to, but, I had parents that were in town and other things that kept me more subdued, I guess. But, race relations in Austin have been somewhat, I know, strained, especially when they closed down Anderson, and that was a big community icon place because my parents went there, everybody's parents went there, and even now we have the reunion. It's for all of the grades, all of the classes, and all of the years. Everybody comes together around that. So I did have some personal feelings about the school opening up on the other side and it's losing the yellow jackets and the black and gold and everything. And I understand that many of the trophies and things are at Doris Miller Auditorium, and I've seen them there. But it was a big deal. And like I said, at that time, my parents protected us from a lot at that time. So I don't know. I'm not very much help in that regard.
So what is your life like now? And I know we've talked about, Austin's changing, but thinking about kind of a combination of these contemplations. So not just about your personal experiences with race, but thinking about race in your life now and race in Austin now, and how it maybe is the same or maybe changed.
Yeah. Well, I experience Austin everywhere. I mean, I don't have any qualms about going to restaurants or anything, there. I've introduced some of my friends, my neighbor across the street, and different other people that I've taken to One World Theater. That's my favorite venue. And they're like, what? Way over there? And, the tickets are so high and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it's great, and I went to a venue just Friday night that was new, Hispanic owned, I know. It's the Austin Coliseum. And that is off of 183, and it was a new experience for me. It's a huge place. They had not my kind of music, but my little friends wanted me to go with them. It's Jacket Edge and John B. and, a lot of youth there, a whole lot of youth. And I was kind of glad to see some place for them to go. I do live in the community that is near, and I live 2 doors down from Miss Cash, who's the owner of Midtown Live. And remember the incident with Midtown burning, Burn Baby Burn, all that? That was, it's coming back. The memories are coming back. That infuriated me. And so, I'll go to that to that club from time to time because it's so close to my house, and I know her and stuff. But I don't know. I think Austin has changed a lot, and that it's open. I mean, I'm seeing it more, but I don't know. I don't know, since I feel a little. I'm older now, and so I don't get really involved with a lot of the political things that are happening, but I do have memories of things that have happened that are not right. But I think there's hope. I mean, I think that Austin does, have a real future for being, East Austin especially, for being welcoming to everybody. I mean, one of the convenience stores that we used to always go to is now a coffee shop, 24 hours. The person that notices it more is my sister. She's like, "What? That's a coffee shop? And look who's in there." She lives in Houston now. She's a little more radical than I am. I'm like, "Yeah, isn't it cool?" She's like, "Oh, no. It's different." So, and that's on MLK. I forgot the name of it, but it's really nice. I've been in there before. But anyway, I guess for me, I've just had to raise my son and expose him to everything that would make him a well-rounded person. And so I'm not as closed-minded about things. Maybe so on the other hand. The school where I used to work is right near my home, Pierce, which is now Bertha Means, the all-girls school. Took my son there for Take Your Kid to Work Day, and someone tried to talk him out of his hot dog, and he goes, "Here, you hungry?" I'm like, "No, that's your..." I mean, I'm sorry. But just things like that I didn't want him to have to deal with in going to school, so that's why I was in private school all his life. And I don't know, maybe I flipped it. I don't know. I don't think that I have, but I just wanted what was best for him. But anyway.
So is there anything else that you want to make sure that you share or discuss or have a chance to say?
I don't know. I'm happy that the church is still the pillar of the community, all of them, and that's what brings everybody and unites everybody on Sundays. And although they're the most segregated place, it's not that way as much anymore, but they're very segregated. But my memory of community was always family and friends and folks like us, getting together and doing things. It's not, I guess, as much anymore because everybody's spread out and this, going to different schools and all. So, I don't know. I haven't given this much thought, but I hope that our community is as eclectic as it's becoming now, is more accepting of different people or learning about others, and it's just that every time I see Whoopi Goldberg doing that skit where she has a towel on her head and spinning a little girl. My sister and I did that. We did that, and I'm happy to wear my hair like this now, because I'm accepting of who I am, but I'm accepting of other people, and I think that's what we need to focus on.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.